Let me tell you about my dad. He's what you'd call a textbook boomer. White, attractive in that rugged, never quite grew out of his 20s kind of way, grew up solidly middle class in a time when that actually meant something. He's the type who drifted through life without any particular ambition or grand plan, but here's the thing, he never needed one. The world just sort of worked for him. He'd show up, put in an honest day's work, and things would fall into place. Not spectacularly, mind you. He's not wealthy or wildly successful. He gets by, pays his bills, has a roof over his head. But that's about the extent of it. And honestly, he's perfectly content with that. His needs are simple. A cold beer after work, a functioning TV, maybe a fishing trip now and then. He never chased the American dream because he was basically born holding a participation trophy for it. The American dream light, if you will. Just add water and stir. Now, politically, oh boy. My dad is grossly right-wing. And I mean grossly. We're talking full-on, Fox News on repeat, shares memes he doesn't fact-check, the whole 9 yards. He's got opinions on everything, delivered with the confidence of a man who's never had to question his place in the world. He believes my mother cheated on him, not that he could have possibly been a difficult husband to live with. Perish the thought. He thinks abortion is murder, full stop, no nuance, end of discussion. But here's where it gets interesting, and I have to give credit where credit is due. My dad is patently, genuinely not racist. I know, low bar, but in his demographic and political alignment, that's actually somewhat remarkable. It's a relief, honestly. Growing up, my sister and I never had to sit through awkward Thanksgiving dinners where we had to pretend not to hear some horrific comment about our neighbors or classmates. Small mercies. And here's another interesting thing about dear old Dad. He's never once given any indication that he thinks women are lesser beings. Never suggested we're not as capable, not as intelligent, not as worthy of respect or opportunity. He didn't raise us to be dainty little princesses who needed protecting. Oh no. When Dad had a drywall job and one of us was free, guess who was learning to drywall? That's right. My sister and I can patch, tape, and mud with the best of them. We've swung hammers, operated power tools, hauled lumber, crawled under houses to fix plumbing. He treated us like we were perfectly capable of doing anything, which, revolutionary concept, we are. But, and here's the massive, glaring, absolutely baffling but. He does think women are sneaky, conniving, manipulative bitches who will stab a man between his shoulder blades the moment he turns around. It's this weirdly specific gender bias that makes absolutely no logical sense given everything else about how he raised us. It's like he simultaneously believes women are equals while also being convinced we're all secretly plotting the downfall of mankind, one poor unsuspecting dude at a time. My sister and I have spent hours, trying to figure out where this came from. We were never raised with that narrative. He never treated us like we were being deceptive or untrustworthy. We're both successful professionals now. I work in healthcare, she's in corporate finance. When Dad has a serious question about health insurance or retirement planning or legal documents, who does he call? Us. Who does he trust to give him solid advice? Us. Who does he turn to when he needs help with the big decisions? Us. So there's this bizarre cognitive dissonance happening. He respects us individually, trusts our judgment, values our opinions, but still maintains this overarching belief that women, as a general category, are fundamentally untrustworthy. It's exhausting and confusing, and sometimes I wonder if maybe this inherent acceptance of women as equals, even if he thinks we're evil equals, is actually what makes the difference. Maybe it's better than someone who genuinely thinks women are inferior beings. I don't know. The bar is literally on the floor and we're still doing limbo under it. I digress. Let me get to the point of why I'm telling you all this. Obviously, because of this deeply embedded belief that women are all sneaky, manipulative creatures, my dad also firmly, absolutely, without a doubt believes the narrative that women routinely use abortion as a form of birth control. Just casually, carelessly, like we're stopping by Starbucks for a latte. Just willy-nilly out there making it rain with abortions like an NFL player at a strip club, throwing procedures around like they're singles on a Saturday night. I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to have this conversation with him. How many different angles I've approached it from. The medical facts. The emotional toll. The actual statistics about who gets abortions and why. The economic barriers. The legal restrictions. The waiting periods. The protesters women have to walk past. I've tried everything. Logic, emotion, personal stories, statistics from reputable sources. Nothing landed. Nothing stuck. It's like trying to argue with a brick wall that's been specifically designed to deflect reality. But lately, I've been thinking about this differently. I've been changing my tactics. Instead of just hitting him with facts and figures and moral arguments, I've been trying to think about what actually resonates with him. What makes sense in his worldview. What analogies might actually break through that thick skull of his. I've been more strategic about the questions I ask and the battles I choose to fight. Because here's the thing, I know my dad. He's stubborn as hell, but he's not completely unreasonable. There's a person in there who can be reached, you just have to find the right frequency. And recently, I had a breakthrough. A genuine, honest-to-God breakthrough that I'm actually proud of and wanted to share with anyone else out there who's been banging their head against this same wall with the men in their lives. So here's how it went down. We were having one of our regular conversations. You know the kind, where you're just chatting about nothing in particular, and then somehow it veers into territory that makes you want to scream into a pillow. He made some glib, throwaway comment about women who use abortions as birth control. Just said it so casually, like it was an established fact, like he was commenting on the weather. Obviously, I rolled my eyes. Hard. I could practically hear them creaking in their sockets. Of course I told him that was a ridiculous, patently false statement that has absolutely no basis in reality whatsoever. That no credible data supports this narrative. That it's propaganda designed to dehumanize women and justify restrictive legislation. But then, instead of launching into my usual passionate, fact-filled tirade that I knew would just bounce off him like rubber bullets, I took a breath. I switched gears. I tried something different. I said, "Look, Dad, I hear you. And I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. I really am. But I'd appreciate it if I could give you my thoughts on it first. You're a lot of things, but you're not a hypocrite, and I genuinely think you're open to changing your mind when a fair point has been made. If what I say doesn't make sense to you, then we can talk about why." Fair. I could see him processing this. It's not often I approach things this way. Usually I come out swinging, and he digs in his heels, and we both walk away frustrated. But this time, I was offering him something different. Respect for his position, an invitation to actual dialogue, an acknowledgement that he's capable of reason. He looked at me for a moment, maybe a little suspicious about where this was going, but then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Go ahead." I took another breath. This was my shot. "So, Dad, remember your vasectomy?" His face immediately got that uncomfortable look men get when their medical procedures are brought up in conversation. That weird mix of pride and embarrassment. "Yes," he said carefully. "That procedure you had," I continued, keeping my voice level and conversational, "that was a laparoscopic, same-day, outpatient procedure that took less than 5 minutes, right? You literally walked in, they did their thing, and you walked out. You scheduled it at your convenience. No waiting period. No mandatory counseling. No protesters outside the clinic. Just a simple medical procedure." "Okay," he said, clearly unsure where I was going with this. "Now," I said, and I could feel my heart starting to pound because I knew this was the crucial part, "let me explain to you what a surgical abortion actually involves. Not the propaganda version. Not the talking points. The actual medical reality." I saw him shift in his seat, but to his credit, he kept listening. A surgical abortion involves first a doctor's visit to confirm the pregnancy. That's appointment number 1. Then, assuming you can even get an appointment, because in many places there's only one clinic for hundreds of miles, you schedule a separate appointment at an abortion clinic or hospital. That's appointment number 2. In many states, there's a mandatory waiting period between these appointments. 24 hours, 48 hours, sometimes longer. He was listening. Really listening. I could tell. Most times, the procedure actually starts the night before with a dilator for the cervix. So you're already in discomfort before you even get to the clinic. Depending on how far along the pregnancy is and what clinic you go to, you might be awake with minimal pain management, just local anesthesia, feeling every moment of what's happening. Or you might be fully sedated, which carries all the usual risks associated with anesthesia during surgery. Allergic reactions, breathing complications, the works. I could see him starting to really absorb what I was saying. The details were piling up in a way that the abstract arguments never had. The actual procedure takes about 15 to 20 minutes, I continued. Then you're in recovery for 4 hours. 4 hours, Dad. And then, bed rest for 2 to 4 days. You can't soak in a bathtub. You can't use a tampon. You can't have sex for a minimum of 6 weeks. 6 weeks of recovery time. Okay, he said quietly. I leaned forward slightly. This was it. This was the moment. So let me ask you a question, and I want you to really think about it. If you wanted to avoid using birth control, or even just condoms, would you opt instead to get a vasectomy every single time there was a contraceptive failure? Would you be lining up to do that 10 or 12 times a year? The look on his face was priceless. You could literally see the light bulb moment happening. No, he said simply. Does this sound like a good business decision for sex workers? I asked, using his own judgmental framework against him. To be out of commission for 6 weeks every time and subject themselves to multiple surgical procedures with all those risks and that recovery time? Does it make any logical sense that any woman would reasonably do this multiple times a year instead of simply taking a birth control pill every single day? A pill that costs maybe $30 a month and has minimal side effects for most people? No, he said again, and I could hear the realization in his voice. There was a long pause. I let it sit there. Let him really think about what I'd just laid out for him. Let the comparison sink in. Let him imagine himself going through that repeatedly by choice. Finally, I said, the floor is yours, Dad. Do you have anything to add that would possibly justify this actually being a thing after what I've shared with you? To be crystal clear, what you're claiming women do routinely would be the exact same as you relying on vasectomies for birth control instead of just wearing a condom. He sat there for a moment longer. I could see him turning it over in his mind, looking for some argument, some comeback, some way to maintain his original position. But there wasn't one. The logic was too clear. The comparison was too direct. It finally cut through all the propaganda and political talking points and moral grandstanding and got down to simple practical reality. I agree, he said finally. No one would do that. I felt this wave of relief and triumph wash over me. I didn't gloat. I didn't do a victory dance. I didn't say I told you so or launch into all the other related points I could have made. Instead, I just smiled at him. Thanks for being open-minded about it, Dad, I said. I really appreciate that you were willing to listen and think about it differently. We can consider the topic closed. That last part was important. That's boomer man language, for we all know I won this argument, but let's just be manly about it now and act like nothing happened so everyone keeps their pride intact. It's how you let them save face while still acknowledging the shift that just occurred. It's a delicate dance, but it works. He nodded, looking almost relieved that I wasn't pressing the advantage. And that was it. The conversation moved on to other things. But something had fundamentally changed. I could tell he was genuinely reconsidering this belief he'd held so firmly for so long. And that's Hen it hit me. After years of trying every argument under the sun, I'd finally found an analogy that resonated at just the right frequency. Vasectomies. Comparing abortion to vasectomies. Taking something from his own lived experience, his own body, his own understanding of what medical procedures actually entail, and using that as the framework for understanding. Why did this work when nothing else had? I think it's because it removed the abstract morality of it. It removed the question of life and personhood and souls and all these philosophical debates that people can argue about forever without resolution. Instead, it made it purely practical. Purely logical. Would you do this to yourself? No. Then why do you think women would? It also worked because it directly addressed the using abortion as birth control narrative by comparing it to an actual form of birth control that exists for men. It highlighted the absurdity of the claim by putting men in the equivalent position. No man would choose to have repeated surgical procedures with weeks of recovery time instead of using a condom. Therefore, no woman would choose to have repeated surgical procedures with weeks of recovery time instead of taking a pill or using any of the numerous other forms of birth control available. The gift that keeps on giving, indeed. I'm sharing this story because I know I'm not the only one out there having these conversations. I know there are other daughters, sisters, wives, girlfriends, colleagues, friends who are trying to reach the men in their lives on this issue. Who are exhausted from hitting their heads against walls. Who love these men but are so frustrated by their inability or unwillingness to see reality. And I want to say, don't give up. Keep trying different approaches. Keep looking for that angle that will resonate with their specific worldview and experience. For my dad, it was vasectomies. For someone else's father or brother or partner, it might be something different. But there's almost always something. Some comparison, some framework, some way of presenting the information that finally clicks. Also, I think there's something to be said for the way I approached the conversation itself. Not coming in hot with accusations and anger, even though I had every right to both. Instead, acknowledging his capacity for reason, explicitly stating that I believed he could change his mind if presented with a fair argument, giving him respect before asking for the same in return. It created space for him to actually listen instead of immediately getting defensive. I'm not saying this approach will work with everyone. Some people are too deeply entrenched in their beliefs. Some people have too much of their identity wrapped up in their political positions to ever allow themselves to change their minds. Some people are just, frankly, assholes who don't care about logic or consistency or women's actual experiences. But for the people who can be reached, for the people who are genuinely just misinformed or haven't thought it through or are operating on propaganda instead of reality, it's worth trying this kind of strategic, thoughtful approach. Meet them where they are. Use their own logic against them. Find the comparison that makes it real and personal and impossible to dismiss. Because here's the thing, every mind we change matters. Every person who stops repeating these harmful narratives matters. Every vote, every voice, every shift in understanding contributes to the larger picture. My dad is just one man, but he talks to other men. He's part of communities and social circles. If he stops spouting this particular piece of nonsense, maybe some of the people he influences will hear less of it too. And on a persona